Phone, 7:01 p.m. 9 notifications. Phone, group.
That's your cue.
Hi, everyone. And welcome to LitVibes, where stories spark conversations and writing meets the real world. I am your host, Ivinia Benjamin, the founder of Emmanuel Publishing House, and this is your front row seat to the trending issues in writing today. And our panel discussion this evening is on the hot topic surviving the editing process. We have a panel of distinguished authors and editors, and each panelist will introduce himself or herself, and they will tell you who they are and what qualifies them to be able to talk on this subject this evening. On our panel, we have Mr. Sam George, we have Dr. Steinberg Henry, we have Junella Daniels, Deanne John Lewis, Fran Clark, Rosalind Savra McLean, and Veli Nicholas Benta. So we will begin with Mr. George, Sam George. We'll ask you to introduce yourself, say who you are, and what qualifies you to be part of this panel discussion this evening.
Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Sam George, as Miss Benjamin said. I am an author. I recently published a book called The Trust. That was in 2024. And for the last 5 years, I've been a member of Piton Noir, which is a group of Dominican authors and folks who love Dominica as well, even if they're not from Dominica, where we focus on writing science fiction, fantasy, and also incorporating Dominican folklore into the mix. And for the last 2 years, I've been the chairperson of Piton Noir. We've published 3 books in the anthology, The Flying Crapo, and we're in the process of working on book number 4. I have edited for The Flying Crapo, edited for a few other authors that we've worked with. My company, G&D Enterprises Inc. This is one of the services we provide, book design, which includes editing and layout, formatting, and so on.
Thank you, Mr. George. Steinberg and Dr. Henry.
Qualified to participate in this event, I think, because I've written 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and books, and 2 of them are sort of ran into the trouble with editors or publishers, with people who were dishonest or this sort of thing. So I had that experience dealing with the publishing world, and so that gives me an understanding of, and then of course my own approach to the work itself. Do I give it to someone to edit for me? Do I edit it myself? And I also edit other person's work. I work as a life coach, where I work with a dissertation coach, where I work with students whose first language is not English at the PhD level, to guide them through. So I'm always editing stuff. And I think I did a beautiful book from Jali, the singer, a book titled Life Scribes. We edited that and numerous other things. I'm just editing or reviewing a piece now for Ian Jackson on the life of Fitzroy Williams. So there's quite a bit of, so in a sense, I have a sense of what the process is. And when you are through writing a dissertation, you surely know what it is to edit in that sense. So I believe there's something I can share in that respect.
Thank you, Dr. Henry. Thank you. Janela Daniels.
Hi, good evening, all. I am a freelance editor. I've been that way for about 20-something years, I imagine. It started off really as a hobby, me assisting poets and writers in the Dominican Poetic Circle, which is an online group that started on the DominicanDiaspora.com website by Ron Deschamps, who's unfortunately passed away. He set that up on Facebook eventually, and it became a very interactive way for Dominicans across the globe and people who love Dominica and love poetry in the Caribbean, love writing in the Caribbean, to connect together. And we would basically write poems in the moment. And those poems were conversational. So it was a way to encourage people to write. But after the writing process of just having these posts and commenting and writing poetically, what do you do with this wonderful body of work that you've just written down in the moment? So I assisted a few poets on there, and writers, authors, including Giftus John, and also Ron Deschamps himself after he passed away. I edited the collection of poems that were vastly produced from this time on the Dominican Poetic Circle. So yeah, my expertise is more in writing myself, but I'm one of those writers who does not edit myself very well. So I have a bunch of work on hard drive, and I need an editor. I thoroughly believe that everyone can write, can edit themselves to a degree. And once you reach that point of utter frustration of reading yourself 5 million times, it's time to pass on to editors like ourselves.
Thank you, Ms. Daniels. Deanne John Lewis.
Yes, good evening. I'm Deanne John Lewis. I reside here in Dominica. I am the author of Me and All Else. It's my first book, so I'm not as established here as many of the authors on here. Kilia Korm is my pen name. My book is published. This was published this year. It's on Amazon currently. Right now, I'm surviving the editing process in writing the book 2 of Me and All Else. Not a socially adept person, but I'm glad I seized the opportunity to participate tonight in this right here. Virtually connecting with the established authors, Dominican writers, and learning from your experiences.
Thank you, Ms. John Lewis. Fran Clark.
Hi, I'm Fran Clark. I'm probably the only one here who doesn't have a Dominican accent because I was born in London. I'm a writer of women's fiction. My novels include a standalone novel debut called Lovers. I have a 4-book series, which I call the Island Secret series, which are set between London and Dominica, and each book is from a different historical period. I recently released a Windrush-inspired novel called Wherever You Will Go. I hold an MA in creative writing. Although I was born in London, I now live in the English countryside where I run a choir and teach vocals. And I also write contemporary fiction under the name Rosa Temple.
Thank you very much, Ms. Clark. Rosalind Sovra McLean.
Hello all. Thank you for having me on this panel this evening. I'm Rosalind Severin McLean, International Impact Book Awards author of Oceans of Thoughts book series. I have 4 books in the series. I have 3 books for inspirational poetry books about my life experiences. In these books are, inspiring from teenagers to seniors. So anyone in that wide spectrum, right range, or have very well benefited from Oceans of Thoughts. I also have a children's book, and this book has gotten the Literary Titan Gold Award for children's literature. So, and educational. Yeah, because it's an educational book as well. So Oceans of Thoughts, I'm the author of Oceans of Thoughts, as I said, and I feel qualified to actually be on this panel about editing. As one of the ladies said, I think it was Juella, I like that name, mentioned that you feel that you could edit yourself as well, or similar. But from my experience and my the classes that I took on editing, it's advisable to always, you edit yourself, yes. You try the best you can to present edited, clean work to the editor, but it's always the right thing to have another pair of eyes, other than your eyes, edit your work. So this is what I do. I hire people from the Upwork or from the Fiverr, one of these international, what they call them. Anyway, I hire from there, and usually I get probably some India, from Pakistan, I get from London, and they edit Oceans of Thoughts. And one of the compliments that I get from them, and I think I should mention it since we're talking on editing panel, that they find my work is clean. Now, from the course I took on editing, I remember the instructor says, always try to present clean work to your editor or your proofreader. Therefore, there's no, they don't have any inclination to want to change your work. That's something editors and proofreaders try, they do, because they get so involved in your work that they end up trying to change it. So in order for them not to change your work, which they should not do, they're supposed to actually relate to the author before they can think of changing. Sometimes it happens that it comes back a little changed. So that's one of the tips I could give. I would, as we're speaking here, there are many more I can come in with, but as she mentioned it, I just thought I would bring that in, and well, yes, there's a lot more to speak about on my end. And for Dr. Steinberg, it's so good to see him and to be on the panel with him. We went to school together, put it that way. So I've known him a very long time. I just, we live in different parts of the world. I'm listening to time. I read his books and so on. So so I have 4 books, and they're very well awarded books for inspirational, for music, for literature, for historical, and poetry. So these are the awards that my books have gotten, gold awards and winning awards. And we have been, Oceans of Thoughts has been on the nominee for Book of the Year 2025 for the International Impact Book Awards. So there's a lot going on with Oceans of Thoughts. I live in New York, and I'm Dominican all over.
Yes. We saw that you're spotting.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Ball.
And the headpiece and the outfits. Yeah. Dominican all the way.
Dominican, I have my flag. I even have that was my
yes, you can see the flag in the back. Thank you very much, Ms. McLean.
You spoke of 2 different a pair of eyes. You could also get a pair of ears.
Yes. Oh yes.
Most definitely a pair of ears.
Yeah. Reading. Yeah, I know what he's talking about. Because when I write, I read what I write. I'm going to put you on mute for a minute.
All right. I'm sorry, Ms. Severa, but we have to move on in the program. Is Veli Nicholas Benter here? All right. So she's not with us this evening?
No.
Okay. It's obvious that everyone here has authored something or the other. So you've been through the writing process and you've been through the publishing process. So you're fully aware of what it takes to get your book from your hand into the hands of your readers, whoever they may be. And so the question I really want to ask now, because to me, it's very uncomfortable to buy a book in a bookstore and it's supposed to be properly edited and everything. And when you start reading, you're coming across all kinds of errors, and some certain things could have been done better. It causes you to cringe. All right. So the question I want to ask is, how crucial is editing to book publishing? And I'll ask first Mr. George.
Well, I think without question, it is a crucial part. Before one of the final things you have to do before you publish a book, and as you say, I actually have a book on my bookshelf to my right, and it's one of the worst I've ever seen. And personally, I do not like to criticize other authors because, for obvious reasons, right? But when you see certain errors that could have been avoided, I wonder if this person actually used an editor, and or if they edited themselves. And like you say, Ms. Daniels, and by the way, I have to commend you on Ron's book, because I didn't recognize the name at first until you said it. We actually published that book.
Yes, I do remember that we had the whole collaboration going on.
Right.
But yeah, for some people who don't realize it, I'm also a poet known as Kalinagawoi, and I also edit under that name as well.
So without having a different person look at your work, and you have to get an honest editor too, because some people may edit for you and they may just tell you, oh, it's good. They didn't even read the manuscript. They say it's good. I have an editor who is my favorite editor. She knows herself. When she sees this, she'll be smiling. She's always honest with me. She'll tell me, no, Sam, no, that is not you. You have to change this. And as you said, Miss McLean, editors are not supposed to change your work. They can make suggestions. They can say, well, this paragraph doesn't fit there or whatever. But some editors, I think they get a little too engrossed in the process, and they kind of, especially when you are from Dominica and you're writing something related to Dominica, and your editor doesn't know the culture, doesn't understand it, and tells you you have to remove this. To me, it doesn't make sense. But to answer your question, definitely, you can't publish without editing.
Anybody else want to make a contribution to that question?
For a minute. Something that I realized well, actually, I took a course. I made sure I took a course in editing, because I didn't know. I wanted to know. I mean, I edit before because I've been writing for magazines and for newspaper articles and so. But when you're an author, a published author, a published writer, everybody says writer. Everybody is a writer. Everybody can write. But then a published author, you go to a different step. Now, something that I realized, and I'm sorry, that's the dog. Something that I realized, when you write and you want to use an editor, it is not always in the best interest to use someone you know. It is, I don't use Dominican authors. I live in New York, editors. So I don't really see any Dominican editors. I use the Upwork engine, or the Fiverr engine, that will give me, I make a petition for editors, and I choose and I hire from them. Now, coming back to writing something about Dominica, in my books, when I write, I'm writing about my life experiences, and I'm Dominican, so a lot of Dominican dialect is in my book. And when I put the petition out, I specifically told them that I have Dominican dialect. So I needed an editor who understood Dominican dialect, and I found one. And this gentleman.
And you did that, and you found such a person on Fiverr, you said?
On Upwork. Yes. You just put in what you want. You ask questions, and they come to you. And I had a few, but there's one particular one. He said he is used to the Dominican dialect because he lived among them in Brooklyn. I said, that's the guy. And he edited he was so good. I mean, he did 3 books, my first 3 books. He was
okay.
So right. It's always in the best interest to have someone who you don't know to edit your work. That way they don't, well, for me, and I think I speak for many other people, and from the experience I've had, when you know people who know you, they're too familiar.
Okay. As the discussion continues, I guess we'll get back to that. But I need to ask Stein Henry, what exactly is involved, Stein, in the process of editing? Because you've edited material for PhD students, for creative writing, for people that you know. What exactly is involved in that process?
One thing is, let me start with my own work. I do, and it also emerges in dealing with the PhD process. I write 20 pages, 40 pages, 50 pages, 100 pages, and that's just one draft. When I write one draft, 150 pages a draft, then I return and I go forward, as the Rasta would say, to those 150 pages, and I look at them again, and I really bring them down to what I call a level of tightness, where, I always believe whatever is done, whatever I do, I have to do it to the best of my ability. So I'm listening to the text, and I don't know if the ears have particular ways of doing things, but I'm listening to the text, and I'm doing some one quote of reading, then I return to the text again another time, and I reread that text, and I'm always going back over the text, always reforming it. So by the time I hand the text to a publisher, they may decide, because of the Chicago style they want to use in terms of punctuation, they may determine that this font size is better than another. They may determine that a semicolon should come here instead of a dash. They may determine that when I like to write the words father and mother with capital letters. There are certain things I capitalize that they say it does not matter under that particular within that particular style, and I tell them this is what I want to keep. Sometimes
so you tell the publishers what you want to keep. So
yes, I tell.
You're talking about your own material that you've written, right? Your own.
Yes, I'm talking about my own material that I've written. Oh no, they have to, especially when I choose to do certain things certain ways. If a thing is exactly not correct, or that sentence needs to be developed a bit more, I've met editors who'd say, in my last book, Jolita, which was published this year, one editor told me, I found the space between the letters. Is a book that presents a number of letters communicating between a woman and a man. And there were times when the letters were pretty close, like 2 in a day, 1 every day, 1 every other day. But after a while, they became 1 every 3 months. And she found that there was a gap, if there was some sort of narrative I could put in here. So people make those sort of recommendations. But I mean, to really make the thing short, yes. The one other thing, when I first came to the States, I published As She Returned. And I was new to the screen reading technology. I had started to use it, so I had a number of typos. I was new to using the computer as a visually impaired person. I wasn't quite sure. And I sent forward the book. I say naively that those guys were going to do the necessary corrections. And they published the book as it was. When I saw it, I was like in a state of horror. Isaiah was spelled wrong. Deep was spelled steep. This was spelled.
And that was the exact manuscript that you sent to them, right?
That was the exact manuscript that I sent to them. So in 2020.
And they were an independent publisher?
Yeah, they were. And in 2021, I went over, I took that whole book and I just restructured the whole thing and published it again. And that was cleaner. Only this time that I ran into a group of other people who had different intentions. So in a sense, yes, but it is important, Ivinia, to have the editing process. It helps, even though it's another eye, even though it's another ear, even though it's somebody just to say, Steiner's, I don't like the place where that is. Could you put this, Just one more thing. For instance, Anella Shillingford is a fascinating poet. She's from Kulibisi. She launched of Rivers and Oceans, and she sent me her 26. I told her, send me one of the things you're doing for your upcoming body of literature 2026. And she sent me, and I wrote back a note, and I told her, what I'm noticing is that the definite article is emerging too much. The the's. Try to run sometimes, don't do too much of the past, get into the present tense, give the sentence a sharper edge, because we write a lot of the's and buts and ands in our culture, and ifs, and so so those kinds of
things. Guidance. She gave you some guidance that you found it was useful, huh?
Well, I provided some thoughts to her as friend to friend. And she said, because I'm reading and I'm finding this could be a bit tighter. This would be sharper over here, because depending on the subject that you're talking about, sharpen the thing. If it's a blade, sharpen. If it's slavery, make it tight. Give it a little more. Give it a sense of violent beauty. Violent beauty. That kind of thing.
Oxymoron, violent beauty.
Yeah.
Miss Journalist, when you wrote your book, Me and All Else, at what stage did you subject that book to editing, or did you put it through the editing process?
Well, I wrote the entire thing, and then I went to the editing process last. So when I started editing, well, when I went to the editing stage, it was a storm going through my head, because I wasn't sure if I wanted to do publishing anymore. I was questioning the book and so on. So my first draft in editing was basically, trying to ask myself if I should continue editing to get the book published, and so on and so forth.
Did you edit yourself, or you had an independent person?
I did my own editing with the assistance of a family member. She's more experienced than me in writing, and she's also a published writer. So she decided to, assist me in editing. She didn't do the direct editing for me. She would give me, I send the manuscript to her, and she gave me suggestions. She would tell me, ask me if I think this should go there, if I want to use a different word. So she would give me suggestions instead of just editing out for me.
And you did the final editing yourself?
Yes, I did the final editing myself. Although when I uploaded to publish, Amazon still told me that I had a few typos, even though I went through it over, more than twice. And then I still had typos. And so when I was publishing up on Amazon.
Even if you edited it twice, when you got to Amazon, you still had typos, right?
Yes.
You edited yourself.
When you upload, they will still let you know if you have any typos or grammatical errors you want to correct.
Very well. Thank you very much. Yes. Now, Ms. Daniels, why do you think that it is okay for a writer to self-edit their own work?
Well, I think, as Rosalind was saying earlier, you really do need to give an editor a very clean manuscript, the best possible you can. And, it's a very frustrating experience, because you've read it to yourself so many times. You're nitpicking at it. It's like Deanne is saying, she looked at this thing and now she's questioning whether she should even publish. It becomes that whole entire emotional experience. But you have to push yourself through that entire experience, because that is what refines your work. It allows you to do a sort of, not quite writing experience or writing the actual thing, but a writing experience of actually bringing the product to this place that you wanted it to be, to envision your words in a way that delivers what it is you intended for the book. So allowing yourself to do that allows you to bring the voice to the book that you want. When you've got it to that clean decision, and that's a very hard decision to make when you really feel you're ready. Like I said earlier, I have books on my hard drive that I know require editing, but I've not got it to the point of.
But these are books that you have written. These are your books you've written, right?
What's that?
the books on your hard drive are the books that you've written for yourself.
Yes, that I've written for myself. So for me, the process of self-editing is necessary to get it to that clean stage where I'm satisfied as a writer that my product is what it is I wanted it to be. And when I do get it to that stage, that's when I will bring it to an actual professional editor. But I also believe in the concept of there's safety in multiple counselors, right? So Steinberg was mentioning, the Chicago style. There's all kinds of formatting rules and different styles that you can present your words in. Of course, we have a Dominican dialect, and our Dominican writers tend to want to write with that little bit of flavor, whether it's in the English that we use, the patois, the Creole, the Cocoy that we use, or even just in explaining things in our writing or narrating things in our writing that are very uniquely Dominican in culture that perhaps people just don't get it.
Well, yes, there's a place.
But we get it, right? So
place
when we get to that self-editing part, we are able to create that product. And then, as Rosalind was saying, you get to, instruct the editor, hello, I don't want you to remove this element of it. And so because you know your work well by the self-editing process, you're able to also engage the editor in a more interactive way. Your book should never be given over to someone who just goes, check mark like a teacher, hands it back to you and gives you a grade. That's not the process of editing. Editing is supposed to be a conversation between you and that person who's editing your work, who's giving you oversight, like Deanne happened to have with her family member. Somebody who's making suggestions to you, well, how about this? How about that? And you coming to the process also of another second layer of self-editing. So together with your editor, you come up with the final version that you're both satisfied with, that your voice is there and the editor has done their work in producing a beautiful product that is sellable, because we're not writing for us to just write. We want to share. And the sharing process when you get into books is a commerce. And so the book does have to have a level of commerce to it.
Very well, very well. Now, Ms. Clark, how important it is. You've written several books. You've written Standalone, Where People Go. You have an MA in creative writing. So I will imagine that you've gone through the process yourself. How important it is, do you think, to hire a professional editor in before your book gets to the publishing stage?
Oh, absolutely. It's so essential. I hire an editor that has worked with me since I became an independent author. So before that, I was traditionally published. So the editors were always in-house. And so there was a lot of going backwards and forwards with the editor, trying not, as somebody else on the panel has said, I think it was Junella just now, not to take your voice away so that you are still on the page. But I was absolutely not trusting myself with anything to do with proper grammar and that kind of thing. Because as I think it was Sam George who said, finding a book in a bookshop, that's just a load of, with full of mistakes. That just shouldn't happen. I just can't understand it. So I would never do that. I would never click publish if I hadn't hired an editor. So when I'm writing, I suppose I don't call it editing. I call it drafting. So I'll write the first draft, which is usually a lot of rubbish. Second draft, where I'm going through and trying to understand what I've just written. Third draft is getting it into some kind of shape where I can pass it on to. There are two very reliable people that I pass my work on to read. And after their comments, I'll go through and I'll do another draft. And when I'm happy, then I will send it to my editor. So it's an absolute must. Absolute.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, Mrs. McLean, you spoke earlier on of the importance of preserving the cultural integrity of your work and the historical integrity of your work. So you wouldn't want anybody changing if you use a certain dialect or if you use certain Dominican expressions. You wouldn't want somebody to edit that out. what happens when you disagree with your editor? How does that work?
Okay, I'll give you a little rundown on before I even get to the editor. I have a team of 3 ladies, who after I have done all I think I have done correctly, I send it to them. And they are such great critics, they would find it little even as a tea, to edit. All right. Now, then I'll send it over to the editor, the one I have chosen. Now, for the dialect, the Dominica dialect, because a lot of my work in the 3 books I've written, I have the Dominica dialect in there, to give it the flavor, the kick of what I want to do. And the editor or the proofreader editor who I had chosen from Brooklyn, the guy who lived in Brooklyn, it's a white guy too, who lived in Brooklyn. He said he lived and he knew Dominica. He has been to Dominica and he had Dominican friends. He was familiar with the dialect. So that was more than perfect. But there's something that we need to understand too as authors. I will not even say writers because everyone can write. We need not to write as we speak, always as we speak, even though it's dialect. Even though it's a dialect, you're going to say, like I would say, oh my God, I don't even know the dialect. That's dialect right there. I don't even know the dialect. Not every word in the dialect we write on paper. Because remember, you want an international audience to read your work, unless you only want Dominicans to read your work. Well, I want my work going to Africa, if it has to Australia. I want it international. Mm-hmm. So I have published for international audience to read my work and to understand the dialect. Now, they are so intrigued when they read about the Dominica dialect and I put in about the testimony of Dominica, or I write about convent, or write about the band. I used to have a all-girl band, and I wrote about the band, and that is pure dialect. That thing have a lot of vibe. Well, of course, I gave it to the proofreader who understood the dialect. This is so important. The proofreader you choose has to be able to understand your work. If you're writing inspirational poetry, if you're writing just regular novel style, or whatever it is you're writing, the proofreader that you choose has to be able to understand what you're doing. So they don't want to change your work. And as I mentioned, you don't write how you speak. That's a big misconception I find with a lot of our people. They say anything, they write and they put it down. And then they think, oh, because they are so and so that it can go. No, it can't go. That is
right. But I'm sorry, but also I don't mean to interrupt you, but are you self-published or are you traditionally published?
I'm self-published on Amazon. I'm published on Amazon.
Okay, is there anybody apart from Miss Clark who's been traditionally published before? Meaning that you were signed into a publishing house with a contract and they paid you an advance royalties and everything. Is there anybody here who's gone through that experience?
But I will.
Miss Clark.
Yeah, let me say something. You get royalties on Amazon too.
Oh, no.
What's that?
No, I understand, but I'm just trying to make a distinction between the process you go through, the editing process you go through when you're traditionally published, and the process you go through when you're self-published.
It's the same process. It's editing.
Actually, it's not.
It's not.
It's not the same process. Can you shed some light on that? Shed some light on Ms. Clark on the difference between the process, the publishing process, the editing process in self-publishing, and the editing process in traditional publishing.
I think in traditional publishing, the so-called editors, there's something that they are looking for. They have a tendency to intervene in the text and to suggest ways in which certain things could be written. I think in this case, the author, as Rosalind says, has to have a certain authority on the subject matter. For instance, I write Calypso stuff. When I did Calypso Drift, I ran a lot of Creole because Creole lyrics are all inside of Calypso in the works, in the island culture, and it's a broad sweep. Now, if I were to take that to a traditional publisher, they would be questioning, how it fits into their society. Now, that is an interesting thing. Rosalind mentioned if you're going to do international work, you have to write in a way that, and that is debatable, because there are people now, there is a trend now in writing, particularly in cultural writing, and in island stories and stories tropical, other places. There's a trend now for that particular kind of literature, particularly when it blends the culture with a kind of philosophy. So in a sense, and the language comes in nicely, particularly when it is explained and explored. I think we are at a stage where we should create new words and so on. So traditional publishers, if you can explain to them, then they will realize this author has a particular trajectory. They may wish to minimize the quantity, because they are still into that audience research thing. We have to write for an audience. We're trying to meet a particular audience. Your book fits into that particular category. You know the talk. When I do self-publishing, however, I tell the guys, this is what I want. And
but that is it. You have that leeway, which is what
you have that leeway. The only thing that I make sure, and this is what Fran and others have been saying, the text, when it is handed to the publisher, it has to be a clean text. So the number of corrections, as we all are finding out, are just punctuation, and these are basically sometimes, cultural style book kind of stuff. Do you have to follow it? Not necessarily. Okay. But certainly whatever we hand over, let us make sure that at least it is 99 or 97% in order.
Thank you, Stein. Let me just go back to Ms. Clark quickly. Oh, you want to say something, Mr. John?
Yeah, if I might add on the question of the difference between traditional publishing.
I'm talking about the editing process.
Yes. I'm saying that if the difference between using a traditional publisher to edit your work and self-publishing editing is, the traditional house usually have, first of all, in-house editors, and they will usually have 3 to 4 different types of editors. One would be a copy editor, a proofreader, a substantive editor. So they may use all of these people, and they all have different functions. Whereas when you're self-publishing, you typically just use one editor or one person who will do all of these things for you, or 2 people who one may do the copy editing, another might just do the final proofreading. So I think those are the bigger differences in going through a traditional publisher versus self-publishing your work.
Shouldn't we also say that it takes a bit, you do not automatically get to a traditional publisher?
That's true. And in addition, it is less likely you would tell them, keep something in there, and they would listen to you. Most of the time, they have control of your work.
Let's ask Ms. Clark, who's been through the traditional publishing process, to explain to us how the editing process went. I'll come back to everyone, but let's just have her explain it.
Okay, so my very first novel was traditionally published. It was published by a small publisher, and they had an in-house editor. So now that's going back to 2014, between 2013 and 2014, when we were going backwards and forwards with editing.
Are you there?
Oh, everybody disappeared for a second. So my experience was going back and forwards a lot, because there was a lot that he wanted to change, because in his opinion, the majority of people who would be reading my book would not be from the Caribbean. And therefore, the majority of people wouldn't understand certain things that I put into my book. So we had a big battle, especially about something that I thought was really wonderful about the number of rivers in Dominica and the people crying over a death and there being an additional river. He didn't like it, and said no, it just wouldn't fly. So there is a battle going on. But fast forward to the 2020s, when I was published by Simon & Schuster and by HarperCollins, there is a lot more leeway as to what you want to have on the page, because we all read internationally, we all read books from all over the world, and we all experience different cultures, and we all understand each other, whether it's a dialect from Jamaica, Dominica, or wherever. We do understand it. So to that extent, you do have this certain amount of leeway. So going to what Sam George was saying, in terms of the different styles, there are 4 stages of editing, which June Ella will probably attest to. 4 stages of editing, and then you have your proofread. So what I do now, because I've written so many books, I can bypass constructive editing and all of that, and go straight to a copy edit. And that's what I do as a self-published author now, which is what I think a lot of people will do. They go for one editor, and whatever happens as a result of that book is what they stick with.
But I have this question though, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
What made you switch from traditional publishing to self-publishing? Because it is the goal of every writer to be traditionally published. A traditional publisher puts you through a particular type of editing process, a particular type of marketing process, a particular type of royalty process that is supposed to be better than the self-publishing. So why did you move from traditional to self?
Yeah, as well as sacking my agent as well. This is one of the things that people don't seem to realize about traditional publishers, is they are gatekeepers. So they decide what they believe is going to sell and what they don't. And I was being led down a path of writing a type of book that they thought was going to sell. It wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I decided, well, I've got all of these stories that I just want to get out there. I'm going to do it as an independent publisher myself. So I set up my own publishing company, and that's how I now continue.
Okay.
Of course, I don't have all the marketing power behind me, but I'm learning.
Okay, very well. So I want to have, I know we're running out of time because we almost 8 o'clock, but I have, Miss McLean, I'm going to come back to you. But I want to ask Miss Daniels, Janella, what tips would you give to writers to help them to survive? Because we're talking tonight about surviving the editing process. I took a creative writing class one time, and our lecturer asked us to submit pieces of our work, and one particular person submitted a poem that was probably about 18 paragraphs, and he loved it. And she went to town on this, and she cut this thing down. She cut it down. And when we got back to class and he saw the poem, he said, there's no way he's accepting this. And he just took back his poem exactly how he had it before. And that was it. He was not going to agree to any cutting of his material, even if it was worded, it was long-winded. What tips would you give to writers as to how they can survive the process of editing?
Well, the first thing I truly believe in is safety and multiple counsel. So you do need a team. I like Rosalind's idea. She has her own personal team of people she feels are going to not just give you the yes sycophant, yeah, you did a lovely job, that's fantastic. You don't want people who are just cheerleaders. You want honest people in your life who do know you, because I do believe that is a necessary part of how you edit yourself, by having other people who understand your voice, who understand what it is you're trying to produce, read your work first, and then you can move more professionally to editing. So allow yourself a team. That's the first step. Make sure that that team is made up of people who are not just going to pat you on the back and say, great job, well done. they're really going to get in there, but not in a very horrendous way like you just explained. Like, that is not editing. That is really just breaking someone down. And a good editor would not be that type of editor. So if you find your experience in people who are just, they're like a teacher with the red marks everywhere and that's all, and you just have to go back to the drawing board, you don't need that kind of editor.
But this is what Jane Friedman,
you don't.
I'm sorry, but this is what Jane Friedman said when she wrote her blog post on the exact subject, how to survive the editing process. She says, prepare for a lot of red ink, anticipate criticism. And she says, in spite of all of that, you will still view your editor as a partner who's protecting your work. So she says, don't fear the red ink. That's what she's saying.
So that is true. You do have to allow critique, but somebody knocking down everything and telling you revamp that, basically does not know how to edit. Editing is a two-way conversation. You need an editor who can both tell you, well, I think you should consider this, and I believe this would be a better way of expressing that. It's that kind of critique that you need. Not, you need to change that, you need to change this, and you need to make sure you get rid of that. You don't need that kind of an editor. Now, if you find you're in that position where that's all you're receiving, rather than positive critique and suggestions to develop, then you need to switch editors, you need to switch your team, and that's okay. You have to have the balance of both. You have to have the balance of people who are able to see the worth and the value of what you're producing, as well as be able to say, this is how you could enhance it. And the best way you can step forward, like I mentioned, is to have a team who understand your voice. So that's first step. But the next step, I believe, is to be very objective and to find an editor who does not know you, who does not understand necessarily even the kind of dialect you may choose to use. You want them to do a little bit more nitpicking at that point to just give you that edge, because we are not publishing to not be read. It is a form of commerce. So there is a degree in which the publishing houses that already have their team and want to direct people into selling books, they have a point. It is a point of commerce. So there's a little bit of balance. What they do, unfortunately, is, like Fran was saying, just completely take over a person's work and a person's direction of where they want to bring their work. And so you need to have that balance of finding the editor and the publishing group or the self-publishing tools that you need that help you refine a balance between what it is you came up with in the first place and what it is you really hope to see other people connect with once they have that book in their hand. So a little bit of objectivity on your part is also needed. And that's a second tip. It's like, you can't take yourself that seriously where you have a meltdown over every little red ink. You're not perfect, and you have to understand that. At the same time, you have to be protective of your work and the value of what you're trying to bring to the table and be able to defend your position. Not in some sort of battle, but definitely be able to say to an editor, no, I actually prefer this expression for this particular reason. Let me explain to you.
Well, yes, that's when
the editor has the conversation that you need to help you refine what it is you need to get to.
And if I go to Miss John Lewis, let me just go back to Miss McLean, because I'm asking the same question as well, surviving the editing process. But for you, it will be different, because remember, you are the one guiding the person that you've hired as to what you want to keep and what you want to, especially your dialect, your Creole language. How do you, to answer the question, how do you survive your editing process?
Okay. Self-publishing is not just, there's a lot going on with self-publishing. And why I said is the same thing, because you need the editors. As Miss Clark says, there's 4 stages in the editing or whatever. But to me, it's the same thing, because you need an editor, a good editor, to edit your work. I've had hired editors that I've had to let go because of the same thing, trying to take over and change my work. And no, you can't change. I'm a poet. I write poetry. I write script. I write everything. And you want to change my poetry, you don't know what I'm thinking when I'm writing poetry. You write poetry from the inside. So when you put it out there, the editor has to be able to understand that sort of work. Now, why I say it's the same thing, because it has to be edited. When I submitted my books for the awards that I got, these books were edited. They had to go through proofreading and everything, 9 yards, before they could even present an award to the book. So in everything that you're doing, when it comes to be an author and to write it, you're going through editing stages. Whether it's the publishing houses, which for me, the way I look at it, they just have to take your money, or whatever it is. Now with me, I did the self-publishing. That means I wrote the books, I had it edited, and I hired editors. I hired the formatting guys. I hired the person to do the book design, everything. You have to hire people to do the book for you. The professionals out there, I get them on the search engine. So then the book comes out. Okay. I'll give an experience I had with my children's book. I put the petition in to get an editor for the children's book. I also mentioned I had a little bit of the dialect in there and the Caribbean dialect in there, and poetry as well as script for the children. I got several options, and I hired this guy from England. He is a teacher. So I told my daughter, I said, well, he's a teacher. He said he does children's stories and he teaches children, so he should understand the children's language. Remember, when you're writing for children, they have a certain language that they use. What I did, I was trying to remember going back in my days at home and trying to write how I think the children speak at home. And I said, no, I'm in New York. I'm listening to the children and the conversations with the parents on the trains and other places. And I started writing in the children's language. He said he has a PhD. He has all these qualifications, whatever he has. And he went and sent me and changed my children's book. And then he calls me on the phone, because you could call through the computer. And I told him, I don't have no PhD, but I took a course in editing, and I know if you're a professional editor, you do not change the author's work. And you change my work to make it sound like you. I said, I'm writing for children. Children is repetition, exciting their creativity, exciting their observation skills. And I'm going into this poetic thing to exciting the children. And this man says, I'm repeating my words and change my work. I fired him. And I found another editor who understood children's poetry, who understood children's language. I say language, I mean the way children speak. 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, they don't want to speak like us. They're trying to learn to speak.
I think, Rosalind, just hold up a while. I think something beautiful is emerging from what you are saying.
Okay.
And Ivinia, here is the matter as it stands. There are differences in perception and cultural differences. And when you come out of a Caribbean society writing text, your tone is different, your language is different, your rhythm is different. The words you select is different. A person comes from another culture. We have an oral sort of culture. We have a way of expressing ourselves with our bodies, in our song. We have a lot of other things that come to complement our consciousness as writers. So when you hand over that work to somebody who was socialized differently, and who comes to the work thinking that if you're Caribbean, no matter, even if you live in New York or Stone Mountain, Georgia, as I do, or somewhere in Chicago, no matter where you come from, you're Caribbean. And therefore you have to be taught that this is the language that you're supposed to use. So here is my other point we have to have, and this is something, it's internal now, we go within our own spirits and minds. We have to have a sense of pride about what we are doing as authors. There was a big discussion last night, or was it on Tuesday night, as to whether we should have an audience, we should select the audience before we write, or whether we should just write. You see, if we have a sense of worth, of well-being, a sense of profound desire to be excellent in what we do, I think this is a subtle, if not wonderful, editing process at this stage. So whatever we put out, when it takes off from us, when it leaves us, it has to be something that is, again, and we've said that over and over again, to survive the editing process, what we present to anyone to read has to be almost complete and wonderful.
But clearly you must spend time crafting your material. You as Miss
you have to spend time doing it. You have to do many readings over and over again. It's not just do it and send it out. It has to be treated, cared for. You have to rumble with it, sleep with it, dream with it, wake with it. But at least I do that. It has to disturb me. I have to come back to it. It's like, because a text is a living thing. A lot of people know text is a living thing.
I'm sorry, I'll interrupt you there. And that's what I mean by you have to be able to defend your work, because you've spent so much time with it. You know exactly what you want to produce. And until you reach that point, you're not ready for editing. It's not about not ready for publishing, you're not ready for editing.
But
you have to be able to be self-edited in that process that Steinberg is mentioning here. You got to eat that thing, sleep with that thing, and over and over again.
But listen, in my experience, many authors or many writers are not prepared to go through the third and the fourth and the fifth writing of their own manuscript. After the first manuscript, they come in quite excited. I have this thing, I want to publish it. And, they want to go on Amazon. They know they want to make money. They want to do. And you look at the material and it's just not ready. And you sometimes put it through one of the processes. Because I am the acquisitions editor in Emmanuel Publishing House. You don't get past me. Like you don't get past anybody at Simon & Schuster. Because if the acquisitions editor, who receives hundreds of manuscripts every year, goes through your manuscript and he realizes it's in a pile on the floor. It's in a pile on the floor, and it will never get to the other editors. As Sam George said earlier on, in traditional publishing, you do have quite a through. And Miss Clark will attest to that. You go through a lot. You have to do, and I have a list of the editors. You do the developmental editor, who will look at the material, and they will look at the overall structure, they will look at the content of it and the direction where you're going, and they will see if they can help you to develop the plot and the characters and stuff like that. Then you have the line editor, who will go line by line to look to see if you can improve your sentencing, your sentence structure. You have the copy editor. That person will also look at grammar, they'll look at syntax, they'll look at your consistency in your layout of your material. Then you have the content editor, you have the acquisitions editor, and the last person is the proofreader. The proofreader is the last person to make sure one more time that there are no errors. Self-published writers do not have the luxury of having all of these eyes looking onto your material. So you have to be the first pair of eyes that look hard. So I quite agree with Ms. Daniels that you have to go over and over and over again. Now, let me ask Ms.
Can I say something?
Just hold on a while. Let me ask Ms. John Lewis a minute. Because she was saying that she got to the stage in her writing process where she didn't think that she wanted to continue on into the publishing process because it was that daunting. Can you explain to us what you felt and how did the editing that you processed, that you went through, how did that help in making you more comfortable in releasing your material into the public?
Okay, I wrote the book, and then when I arrived at the editing process, I was thinking, when my book gets out there, will it be welcome, in the public, I was, all of these questions keep popping up, like, is it good enough? Will people establish offers, people that made it out there, if it will become, how it will be compared to these other authors. So all these things kept running in my mind, and I was thinking, like, is my work even good enough to compete with everything out there? Will it be written properly? Will the grammar be okay? So everything kept running back and forth in my head, but then I decided, okay, I've done the whole project. I went through all that writing, I all that plotting and staying up and write and everything. So it doesn't make sense, reach that far and decide, I'm not going to get it published. So I started the editing process, going over it. I asked my family member, is she willing to help me with the editing? She told me okay. And then I sent the manuscript to her, and then she started giving me suggestions. She told me she don't want to drown out my voice by just editing for me. So she would give me suggestions, tell me if I find this will make sense, go in there. If I find that word is okay, or if I don't want to change it to something else. So she started giving me suggestions like that. So after all the back and forth, I probably went over it like 3-4 times, trying to make sure it was perfect. The editing was okay. And upon uploading it, I still had 1-2 typos. Amazon told me, like, there's still more typos if I want to correct it and get it uploaded. So I had to do the corrections and upload it to Amazon. And then I had the book published then. And then after I had the book published, my family members still messaged me and to tell me, there's a typo. There are a few typos on your cover. So I originally wanted to redo the book cover. So it was a good timing for me. So I redid the typing and corrected the typos on the book cover after I redesigned the cover, and then I got the book published.
Okay, I really appreciate what you're saying, because in spite of all of your efforts, you still ended up publishing a book with errors. So I'm going to come back to Miss Clark, but Mr. George, I'd like you to explain to us, if you can, the importance of having at least more than one editors or type of editors in the process of editing your book, because we do know that you have the line editor is different from the content editor, from the developmental editor, from the proofreader. How important it is to finding at least someone with several of those qualities or abilities, or having 2 or 3 different people with each with a unique editing ability to look over the material.
Yeah, this also goes to a question posted by a viewer. What does it mean when a publisher says copy editing only?
Okay, I didn't see that.
I just put it up on the screen again. So naturally, if 1 or 2 people look at the same thing, their chances are they may see different errors and miss some errors, because it's just the human eye and the human brain. Sometimes we read what we didn't actually see. And when you are writing, at least for me, I don't know for anyone else, I might be thinking I want to write a particular sentence or write something in a particular phrase, and I don't end up writing that. I end up writing something else. So if you don't edit yourself, and I used to have like this issue where once I begin editing myself, that's a problem, because I would end up thinking the whole thing is no good, scrap it and start all over again. I used to do that I did that for a very long time. But so until I came to the point where, you know what, I stopped editing myself and I hand it over to somebody else and let them look at it and let them find the errors that I need to fix. So without doing that, just simply writing the book or writing whatever it is you're writing, editing yourself and thinking, boy, I've done great, I'm ready to publish. And sometimes you get so excited, you're just ready to just get it out there. You will find yourself, with additional errors that you never saw. And I'll just use myself as an example again. Even the trust, it went through 2 editors, and I still found errors after the book was published. And both editors went through it, told me afterwards, told me the things I needed to fix or the things I needed to change. And then I still found errors afterwards, after it was published. So the more...
And these were professional editors or your friends? Because there's a difference between... of course, the type of editor, that would depend on the type of editor that you hired.
No. They actually work for us. So they did a professional job. So it's not just because I know them, but it's the same job we do for other people. So that was their job. So,
and I think, I'm sorry, just to piggyback off of the whole concept that there are different types of editors, this is where you might run into some of the issues. Some editors specialize in the developmental stage where they can really get you going and get you moving. Others are proofreaders.
Right.
They want to see the final product, and they will deal with, just that little one thing that nobody else picked up on. So you really do have to understand who your editor is, what their skill is in, what their specialism is, and be able to utilize that in the process of what you're doing.
Which is why I say
of counsel.
Most self-published authors will use one editor, and that's a copy editor.
Right.
Most cases they will look for grammar, and as you mentioned, Ivina, they look for grammar. They will look for quality. They will look for sentence structure. But a great copy editor will also give you suggestions to make your work look much more professional. And I went through all of that. And because we do this for customers and clients, I understand that this is what is needed in order to put out the best work that you can.
Sam, you said look more professional. When you say look, what do you mean?
Well, when I say more professional, I mean look clean, like you guys mentioned earlier. Look clean and look like someone actually other than you edited it. That's what I mean.
But the member of the public who sent in the question earlier on, they asked a specific question. What does it mean when a publisher says copy editing only? That means that whatever they're going to do for you is limited only to, because the role of a copy editor is to ensure that the text is free of errors in grammar, in punctuation, in spelling, in syntax, and they may check for consistency in formatting and your style and your tone. They're not going to look for theme. They're not going to look for, context. They're not going to advise you on your characters that are not properly developed. They're only going to look for certain grammar, almost like a proofreader. All they're looking for is grammatical errors. That is all.
Well, they can also offer look for things like clarity and readability of the content. They can also do that.
I'll say something. When I hired a proofreader, or you can say editor, and I put in my bid to hire them, I look at what their qualifications are in the proofreading process. I took the course, and I advise all authors, take the course for editing, proofreading, and you go for all the stages. You know yourself how to do all the stages, the line, the syntax, every one of them. So before you send your book out there, you don't do it already because you already took the course. This is what I did. I took the course in CUNY, they were offering the course for editing and proofreading, and I took it. It took me a while because I was literally studying this thing. Because, you go to school, we go to English, we come from Dominica, we have the best English. And then you realize, hey, there's a lot more intricate things than that. And I took the course. I took 2 courses, a course for publishing and all this, because I was writing, but I had no idea about publishing. And this gentleman, suggested that take a course in editing and proofreading. He had it in his thing, and I also took the additional course. So therefore, you have an idea and you know what's going to happen when you send your book out there. So you're already going through the line editing, the copyright editing. You're going through everything in the editing and proofreading process before you send it out there. That's why I say it's the same thing, because I don't go through it already. and I've written 4 books. So
Alright.
what I'm saying, that's why I say the same thing. Well, hey, I didn't go to school, so I don't know. But you take the pride and the know-how for yourself before you send your book out there to any publisher, whether it's independent or whether it's a publishing house, whoever. Do your work yourself before you send it out there. That's where you take the course, you spend the money and take the course, and that course stays with you for life because you're an author. And then you can always go back to the material if you forget, because I go back to the material as well, just to refresh when I'm ready, before I'm ready to publish the next book. And then you have an idea. So all the editing process and the proofreading process that the publishing house has, you don't have it, and you're doing it for yourself. That's how I know when I sent my books to get the award, I knew they were going to get sent.
So let me ask, so the awards, how many awards you got for your books?
Oh God. I have International Impact Book Award 2024.
What is the prize that came with the award? With the award? You got a trophy? Okay, great.
I have a trophy from the International Impact Book Awards. And to me, that's more than that's my PhD. That's my PhD. Yeah, it's not a joke. That's a lot of work. That's not just writing overnight.
Congratulations.
It's the way I write. Thank you. It's the way when I write, as Mr. Dr. Steinberg says, you sleep with it, you get up with it, you dream it, you get up in the middle of the night and you're writing. I mean, it's a whole process. I don't just write and push it out there. So I'm writing, and I'm in New York, so I'm performing as well, reciting on stage. I'm doing all these different things. Like I'm doing a wedding, and I wrote the script, and she's like, "Oh, I'm going to frame this. I knew you were good, but I said, but you asked me to write something for you." So I did a lot of meditation. I go for meditation and all these type of things to be able to put the work I want out there. So for whatever the event is, So that's what I mean. Anyway, what I was trying to say, take a course. I tell anybody, I don't care how much PhDs you have, take the course for editing and proofreading, because that is for the writing author. Take the course and learn what they do. So before you send your book out there, you don't do it already. So you send it for the other pair of eyes to look over what you did. And that is how I've been doing it.
Rosalind, there's something we can learn from PhDs.
Yeah.
And I do every day. Probably some people should have a PhD so they really understand what it is that they do. Right. And I work particularly, for instance, I had a student from Lithuania, that's outside what was then the Soviet Union up there. I have students from Sierra Leone. I had a student from Estonia, another one from Turkey. You see those students write. And usually China, for instance, Sichuan province, what tends to happen, which in a sense would probably, require a particular kind of editing, is that sometimes their thoughts, they are supposed to write 5 chapters, but sometimes a lot of the material that is supposed to go in chapter 3, it is already written in chapter 2. What should go in chapter 4, it should probably be in chapter 2, and that kind of thing. So they have a lot of material that has gathered that needs a sort of replacement. And sometimes in the process of editing that, or in the process of writing that, they get to a stage where they don't know what else to do. That is when they reach out and say, "Hey, Stein, this is where I am, and I am stuck. I don't know." And then I realize that with an editor can unlock or unblock the flow of certain certain ideas and certain expressions, certain theories and other things like that. So in a sense, yes, whenever you are writing work, what I'm learning is that I could put the work in any order when I'm writing my first draft. And all of us know that you drop the work down and you drop, like one of you said, this is just rubbish. But I think there's some element in its energy, because language is always living. And when you drop your work down, it can fall randomly, in different places. By the time you do your second reading, you begin to realize you can shift it and shift things around again. So, but that should become fun. that is where you begin to play with the work, because the work becomes a sort of thing, a sort of knitting, something you're crocheting, a nice piece of thread work, needlework that you're actually working, and you're seeing the shape beginning to, but there are difficulties in it, and that you have to keep working with it. By the time it gets to that editor, even if it's traditional, or you get to a self-publishing process, they will look at it and realize it's minimal. Whatever corrections they have to put in, whatever suggestions they have to make. But I certainly believe, from what I've observed, and I say observed deliberately, is that you yourself as the author, you have to bring your work. Rex Nettleford used to tell me at the University of the West Indies, whatever you do, do it to the best of your ability.
And that is where at Emmanuel Publishing House, as I've said before, we encounter people who just not ready yet. But they come with the idea, they're enthusiastic, they're ready to be published, and they wouldn't hear no. I remember when we had the second literary festival in Dominica, I think it was the second or the first, second, Derek Walcott of blessed memory was invited as one of our guests here. And there was a night of poetry, and we invited the best of the poets we had in Dominica at the time to perform, and Derek Walcott was in the audience. And the following day, he had an interview on DBS Radio, and somebody asked him, I think it was Alwyn Bully who was interviewing him, and asked him about what he thought about the poetry he had heard the night before. And of course, Derek Walcott. He
was critical of it.
Of course, he said he was not. I don't think he used those words, but he basically said words to the effect that he was not impressed, and that he thinks that people need to go back to the drawing board, go back to the masters, go back to the old poetry, go back to the art, learn the art form. All right, so he said that, but one particular person took offense, and that person was on the radio saying, "And who does Derek Walcott think he is?" And
that's Rasmo. Rasmo was very upset with him.
Well, it wasn't Rasmo, but that person was like, "Who does he think he is?" And I just sat back quietly, and I said to myself, he is Derek Walcott, Nobel laureate. There is something about his material that resonates internationally. That is why he got the prize. So we need to not resist the process of making the work better, because editing is making your work better. And that is why it's important that you find the proper and the appropriate editor to work with you. Now, let me ask Ms. Clark about the cost of hiring a professional editor, because it's important. It's important that and while it is that Ms. Daniels, I quite agree with what she's saying, that you must get your work, and Stein has said it, everybody has said it, Ms. McLean has said it, you must get your work up to a certain level. You must give it everything you have. And when you have exhausted yourself, you release it into the hands of a second pair of eyes, and that would be a professional editor. You need to decide what kind of editing you need, whether you need because at that point, you need to know whether you need a line editor, a copy editor, a proofreader. You need to know what you're hiring. And so the cost of professional services, can you give us any idea of what we should look for? Or how do we select an editor and the cost? Miss Fran Clark, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So from are you talking from like a self-published point of view?
Self-published, because most of us here are self-published.
Sure. Okay. Well, the editor that I have, who's worked with me for all of my 6 novels, she will charge me, and bearing in mind that my novels are somewhere between 80 and 85,000 words, I will be charged anything from between £200 and £300. I'm not sure how that translates. So in US dollars, that's, I suppose, $250 to $350.
Yeah.
So if that gives you an idea, but that's for my budget, because what I did is I checked out all of the editors, the potential editors, sent them a part of my work so that they could send me their edit, and then I chose based on that and what I could afford, which isn't very much. So you could pay £2,000.
All right. So McLean, you hire people on Fiverr and Upwork. What would you typically pay for a children's book, for example, or a book of 80,000 words if you ever had to publish anything like that?
Well, as far as the words, how many words? My daughter is the one who checks the words. I can go. My books are like almost 200 and something pages and stuff. But when I hire the proofreader or editor on Fiverr or Upwork, they bid. Okay, they come with a price.
I understand. So
say they have $20 an hour, or you might say $150 for the full book. So it depends on what you want, according to Miss Fran Clark, or her budget, according to my budget, according to what they have to offer. Because you can get a proofreader that can only do one thing, or you can get those that can do 4 or 5 things. So depend on what you want and according to budget. So what I usually do is I would take as a word for it. I would, instead of going by hour, I would just.
By the way, hold on a while. It's 8:26 and we're going to wrap up at 8:30 because we've got an extra half hour. So after you will just have our closing statements and then we'll wrap up. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it depends on the budget and who you hire. You know, you can always break it down. Sometimes I will tell you, as she said, $250, right? You might be able to get $250, but then you can break it down to what you can afford. Remember, there's hundreds of them on the Upwork or Fiverr, and they want the job, so they're going to bid with you. They rather take the $150 than take nothing at all. Put it that way.
Very well.
This is it's a
Any
good
contributions? Anything on costs, Mr. George or Miss Daniel?
I think it's like everybody has said. I'm so sorry. It really is flexible. It's dependent on your budget. What are you prepared to pay for? You can literally pay somebody thousands of dollars to edit a book, or you can bargain to give them groceries. It really is that. The freelance editing world, there are people who are just beginning, who are inexperienced but talented in editing, who would charge you less. So you really need to find your way in finding the people. And just to kind of throw back a little bit, because we've had a lot of talk about, go professional, go study this. There's a lot of writers out there, they don't have the bandwidth for all of that. So you have to understand your bandwidth may be in your budget. Rather than go and pay for a course, well, start budgeting how much money you may need for your freelance editor to be able to take you through the process of. And so again, it's a learning process of who do you need at various stages of your writing. When you first push yourself out to that clean product, you should be in the developmental editing stage where you want that person to work with you to make sure that that product has gone through a stage of development in its plot and its characters and so on, so that you have a lovely product. Then you need to move on into the actual grammar and syntax and the ways that you're clear in your expressions and so on. Then you need to move into another line of really nitpicking at the typos that may be possible. Then you're onto a proofreader. So at different stages, you can kind of spread your costs out a little bit.
Right.
And you can usually find somebody who's savvy at all of the stages.
Right.
Once you're an editor, you have some fair idea. But there are people who do specialize. Like one of the audience members asked about copy editing. There's some people who just prefer to do that part alone, and they don't want to deal with any other part. So you just have to carefully pick.
And then you also have the specialized editors referred to as technical editors. Like I'm working on this book for this gentleman now. He's a medical doctor. And then he had his peers review the material to see if it was sound medically. So you need to have people in certain genres of writing. You need to have
especially in professions like these, you have to have peer editors.
You must. Otherwise, you can't have somebody who doesn't know anything about the subject trying to edit your work. Anyway, Sam George, you were talking about the cost as well.
Yeah, I think everyone has said it right. It depends on the budget. It also depends on what you want the person you are hiring to do for you. Like I'll say, for example, one of the things that we do is we offer a full service. So it's editing, it's design, it's covers, it's everything. So you can typically get if you can get a publisher to help you with that, to give you everything in one package, that generally comes out better, rather than having to find the money to pay a different person to do everything. If you want an illustrator and all of that stuff, so it depends on what you're looking for, and
Okay.
what you can survive with, eat
Right.
and
So
still publish your book. I think those are the things you have to be mindful of.
all right. So we have 1 minute. So anybody want to wrap up this 1 minute? Miss Johnries, have you anything last words? Anything you want to say, Stein? Anybody?
I'll just say, don't worry if you're going to write. Don't worry about the editing and those kinds of costs or any of that stuff until you've completed the work. If you have a book in you that you want to get out, your first responsibility is to begin writing.
Right.
Complete that, and then you can think about the next steps. Do I need a professional editor, or whatever the case may be, and where am I going to get the money to take care of that? That would be my final word on that.
All right. Anybody else?
I would just add to that. Yes, go ahead and write, but I think that every writer needs an editor, and no, wherever you find the money from, find it, because you need that person. Don't publish anything unless it's been professionally edited.
All right. Do we have any more questions from the public?
Just one more thought. This is not a question from the public. Just a thought to those who want to write, and you've been listening to us tonight. It is, some people think it's a calling, some people think it's a talent. Wrestle with your text, sleep with your text, wake with your text, sing your text, walk with it, carry it in you when you're working with it. The Dominican artist Earl Etienne, whose sketches appear in a lot of my work, those I had to send them to people to edit. He used to tell me, Stein, when I'm doing a piece of work, I went into his studio once and I saw that his canvas was covered with a sheet. And I said, why don't you just leave the work? He said, no. When an artist is working on a particular piece of work, he does not allow anyone to see it before he himself is satisfied that he's ready to make it visible. You see? So we have to hold our work. I think we have to cherish, we have to draft. Yes, we have to almost love it. You see, like a lover. And I think sometimes in the process, you want to give the best to it. I believe in that first process. So when I hand it over and I say, hey, guy, look at this for me. What do you think about this? I will boast a little. When I delivered my chapters as a PhD student, Ivania, you know your boy, one of the readers of my dissertation, he used to tell me, Stein, whenever I saw your chapter, I went for a glass of wine because I know I was going to be entertained.
Wow. The language is
make sure that what we present, even before it gets to them, it is something that to ourselves has value.
Of course. Yes, I quite agree. That we really have to create work of value and of universal value, not just Anyway, so let Ms. Johnries just close us off tonight. If your last word, if you have anything to say.
Okay. Well, my last words would be for any writers. There may be new writers like me out there. Some may probably not be able to hire professional editors and may probably try to do their editing themselves. Well, you can always take your time. If you're not sure of something, there's the internet. So you can always investigate, do your research and, take your time and do your editing. And in the end, if according to where you're publishing, you always, be able to get corrections somehow. Somebody like Amazon would tell you, you made errors there, so you could give
But Amazon, you're dealing with an automated system. You're not dealing with a person, who will tell you, face to face.
or you could
People
get
too.
somebody who is into writing, to do it for you. But you have to start somewhere. You
Yes.
you can always,
Can I say something? One of the very important things that it's needed is to have, as I mentioned, the team. But if you don't have a specific team of friends, you need someone who is an elder in speech, and who is someone who you can trust, a teacher or somebody who can edit for you. Not necessarily because I mentioned her family, and then they put her down or whatever the story was, and she thought she wasn't good enough. You don't need to always have them, because usually the worst people to ask to edit is your family or anything. You need people outside that bracket, and maybe it might be good for you to get maybe a teacher, go to the ministry, get one of the ministers, somebody out there.
But
Who
still,
you
don't
to edit for you before you send your book out there.
Oh.
You always know before. No. You need a professional editor, and Amazon will make sure they know when your book is not professionally edited.
Amazon don't care. Amazon is automated.
Amazon
They don't care.
know.
Amazon is not a person.
It's not.
Anyway.
No.
I'm going to interrupt a little bit with a balance of both.
It's not always a machine.
I'm sorry,
We have
Rosalind.
people who are also.
I totally agree with both sides.
Mhm.
We absolutely need to professionally edit before we publish.
Oh, yes.
However, as Deanne was saying, sometimes you don't have the budget. Sometimes you've just got to gun it and do whatever you have to do.
Mhm.
There are AI tools available for free on the internet.
Okay.
Google Gemini, ChatGPT. ChatGPT even has one specifically for authors. It is okay to edit using these tools, but to remember, like you said, Ivinia, these are robots. They are not going to produce your voice, but what they may do is clean up the whole grammatical aspects of it, the clarity of your expression. They may do like Science says, chapter 2 should have been in chapter 4. They may rearrange the book exactly how it should be beautifully presented, but you still have to go back in and make sure your voice carries over in the entire book. At that point, then you really need to decide, do I have the budget necessary, or do I have a team of people around me I can gather who can become that editing team for me, who either have professional experience or just experience with language and the play of words, and just avid readers as well, who can be on your team. And if you can get it to that, then yes, go ahead and push and do your publication if you're satisfied with what they have produced for you in editing. Don't let it stop you from publishing because you can't get everything perfect how it ought to be and have every professional perfectly in line with your team. You can use AI tools. You can do some of this work yourself. You can go to school and get some kind of knowledge base. But at the end of the day, I think we're all agreeing the first thing you got to do is write. And
You
to
have
bring
to
it
Writing soul.
presentation
Thank you.
value you're proud of.
And, I think we should add something here because of the conversation we've been having. I don't want folks who haven't begun their writing journey yet to be scared off. I don't want to leave here with that impression,
I
because
don't think anybody's going to get that impression because the discussions have been very.
Yeah, it depends. You never know who is watching and who is listening. They might think, boy, I have to get a professional editor. I don't have that kind of money. And you, Ms. Daniels, mentioned people may not have that bandwidth to go beyond just writing. And I mean, I know people who've just given up because they don't want to go through all of that. So that's
I
what
would like to
think.
suggest that the editing process, as my final word, begins with the beautiful soul. What we want, Sam has said it, do not get afraid of this. We want you first to write. And to write from the beauty of your heart and the beauty of your soul. If that is one thing that has come out of all these conversations, we've come to the machines, we've come to the AI, we've come to everything, and those are significantly helpful. But there's something about the person, the living aspect of writing, that which flows from within, the mind producing thoughts, the soul cherishing the sound of the morning. You see those things? That we want to also at the same time encourage, and do not be afraid of expressing these because you are afraid that somebody might say this does not fit. So yes, Sam, this is a point that is well taken, and I think we have all encouraged. We have all encouraged persons to write, and if we have not done it, please let us know. Send a note to Sam. But I think we've succeeded in encouraging. Oh, it's been beautiful. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Right. So we have to wrap up now. I just want to thank each of you for being part of this panel. And hello. Right. So I want to thank each of you for being part of this panel tonight. And the discussions were very lively, very life-giving and enriching. So enriching. So I thank you again, and I wish all of you all the best in your careers, in your writing careers, and every success going forward.
I think I have to publish with Emmanuel next.
I think you should. I think all of you should try us. You'll see. Just try.
All right.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks for having me on the panel. I appreciate this. Promotions and thoughts.
It was great meeting all of you. It was really great.
Pleasure.
Thank you.